Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Zero Gravity Gaming Gold League 2022 Spring Split Playoff Draw Show. I am MXL, joined again by Tex tonight to discuss what happened during the season and give a little more info on teams as they're selected. Over the past 7 weeks, 16 teams competed in a 4-group double round-robin group stage. On your screen now, you see the results of this stage of the tournament. Tex, give us a little bit of a rundown on what happened this season.
Absolutely. Brandon, I'm excited to get into this. So, talking about Group A first. So, Group A seemed to be a closed and shut case until Conduit managed to ignite their spark and take a huge series off AH Frostbane, who shut them down back in Week 2. With that win, they solidified themselves second in the group behind an extremely dominant Imperial Gaming team, who they themselves found. Oh, sorry, I'm butchering the script here. I'm sorry. Imperial Gaming, who only found themselves 2 game losses across the entire season. AH Frostbane wasn't quite able to close out the group stage with a win, unfortunately dropping them to 3rd and into the lower bracket. Moving on, so that's Group A. Moving on to the group of death, what many people called Group B. It trended much the same way up until a massive win from Infernal Dive over RAR in Week 4. And again from Hyperion Sword over Infernal Dive themselves in Week 5. In the end, RAR still managed to come out on top, with Infernal Dive and Hyperion Sword not too far behind. New Wave Vice has looked shaky throughout the season, but the pressure of do or die might just be enough to push this team back into a miracle run in playoffs. Talking about Group C real quick. This group filled with new organizations to ZGG and Revolution. To ZGG. Damn it, I'm sorry, I'm running too quick. And a group filled with new organizations to ZGG, but also Revolution is there. The Group C was a race to the very end for MDF and Conduit Surge especially. While the other matchups were wins for both squads, every clash between these two teams was extremely tense and gave birth to the Vel'Koz support meta in this group. Revolution Shengold looked extremely strong in their win against DePaw. And DePaw even looked pretty good in a lot of their losses, especially toward the end of the season. In our opinion, having talked this out, either of these teams could be a valid contender for the dark horse in the lower bracket, Shengold and DePaw. Going on to Group D. Group D was another set of teams we didn't really know much about early on in the season. With Going Ghost boasting a similar record to Imperial from Group A, there was a clear favorite in the group. But Clinical and G&E Aquamarine both proved to be a solid competition throughout the season, with Clinical barely coming out on top. There are still a lot of unknowns when it comes to this group, but nonetheless, these teams should not be taken lightly in playoffs.
Well,
I skipped a word there. I had to save myself.
Yeah, it happens every now and then.
For me, all the time. So I really appreciate that you're here with me on this. But Brandon, do you want to tell us a little bit about how this draw show is going to work and what we're looking at for tonight?
Yeah, of course. So, big thing to note, any of the teams that you just saw on your screen that were in the top half of the logos on the screen will be placed into the upper bracket, so the 1 seeds and the 2 seeds from each group. The 3 seeds and 4 seeds will be placed in the lower bracket. Teams in the upper bracket are going to have an additional life, allowing them 1 loss and dropping them into the lower bracket. A series loss in the lower bracket will lead to elimination. During playoffs, teams that remain in the upper bracket will play their games every other week. This means that if you win your first round match, your next match will not be played for another 2 weeks. However, upon entering the lower bracket, teams will play their games on the normal weekly schedule we have maintained for the rest of the split. To reiterate, of the 14 teams that are being placed tonight, after match day on Thursday, 4 teams will have a week off, 8 teams will be playing the following week, and 2 teams will have been eliminated from the tournament. Now that we know the format, let's touch a little more on how the teams are going to be placed. We're going to start by drawing the first seeded teams from each group into the upper bracket. Upon completion, we will draw the second seeds from each group, effectively completing our upper bracket. During this process, if 2 teams from the same group would be placed on the same half of the bracket, they will instead be placed into the next valid spot. If a placement from one team would lead to an invalid placement for another team, the first team will instead be moved to the next available spot that would not invalidate the draw. Afterward, the process will repeat instead using the 3rd and 4th seeded teams from each group, mostly following the same criteria as above. The main difference here is that due to 2 teams removing themselves from the group stage, 2 teams will be getting a bye in the first round of the lower bracket, decided upon by the results of the mid-season matchups. These 2 teams will be from groups C and D, who ended up coming out on top during week 4. Additionally, these 2 teams cannot end up on the same side of the bracket, meaning only one team will get a bye on each half of the lower bracket. When a team in the upper bracket is placed into the lower bracket, they will be dropped into the same level of the bracket below them. For example, the team that loses the first matchup listed in the upper bracket will be placed into the first slot in the lower bracket. We'll give more concrete examples once the draw show is completed or underway. With that said, it's going to be time for the draw. As we saw before, the first seeded teams are going to be from Group A, Imperial Gaming, Group B, RAR, Group C, Conduit Surge, and Group D, Going Ghost. With that said, the first team that is going to be placed into the bracket and taking the first slot is going to be Conduit Surge.
All right, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Conduit Surge here. So, Conduit Surge coming in as Group C's first seed, coming into the playoffs with only a single series loss to MDF, with both of those matchups between the two ending up as 3-game series. It's pretty intense competition for the top half of that group. A loss to Revolution Shangold in Week 7 definitely showed some cracks in Conduit's consistency, which can look to be punished by whichever team they're up against. Some highlights: Grand Fate, the author, as we like to say, of the Group C Vel'Koz that other teams picked up on, is known for pulling out a handful of spicy picks alongside Genetics. This bot lane can definitely throw some spice into any series they're a part of.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. I have exactly one game in that group, but some of the stuff that happens in Group C was just wild.
Shenanigans.
There were some
Shenanigans everywhere.
Weird picks that came out all around, of course. But with them being placed into the upper bracket, it is now time to see who will be on the same half of the bracket as them. The 3 remaining teams are from Group A, B, and D, Imperial, RAR, and Going Ghost, respectively. The second team that will be placed into the upper bracket is going to be Imperial Gaming.
All right. So, after a rocky Week 1, Imperial looked dominant for the remainder of the regular season. They ended with a convincing 12-2 game record across their 6th best-of-3. The core of Stone, Made Soft, Noble Bark, and Diet have been looking menacing, to say the least. And this team is one to be feared looking toward the first round of playoffs. They ended a little weaker than they otherwise would have wanted, dropping their second game of the season to Conduit Spark, but Imperial Gaming definitely looks to be one of the stronger first seeds. Only time will tell if they have the ability to run for a title.
Yeah, my personal opinion here, I think Imperial Gaming is probably one of the most dominant teams that we see in the tournament right now. Both them and Going Ghost have just looked lights out this whole season. So I'm interested to see what's going to happen, and especially with them being on the same side of the bracket as Conduit. That's a tough half of the bracket to be on, to say the least. But this does mean that we're going to take a look at the lower half of the upper bracket, and that's going to be between either just RAR, rather. They have the coin flip logo, so I get baited every time. RAR and Going Ghost. The third team to be selected and placed into the upper bracket is going to be Going Ghost.
All right. Quick little snippet about Going Ghost. Coming from Group D, Going Ghost boasts an impressive 6-0 series score, only dropping a single game to GNE Aquamarine in weeks 2 and 7. With the best record in the league, this team looks to be extremely strong, with their bot lane, In Good Faith, and Sam looking dominant even in their losses. However, recent internal issues have caused the team to pick up new players in a handful of key positions, so we'll have to see if the new lineup will be able to contest the other top teams for a shot at the ZGG Gold title.
Yeah, definitely excited to see how that all is going to play out. And of course, we will do the last draw. It is going to be, obviously, RAR going to be the fourth team drawn into the first seed slot in the upper bracket.
All right, so RAR, in what was deemed the group of death by many at the start of the season, RAR managed to hang on and come out on top. Their second round robin was less than ideal, with only a single series win against New Wave Vice. But playoffs could be a clean slate for them. With that said, Kryptonic Killer and Magic Lapse have worked wonders in RAR's wins, and if left unchecked, could easily take over entire games. RAR wants to make a run for the title and prove they're better than the record shows, and they came out really strong in that first half of this season.
Yeah, I mean, they started off 3-0, right? Like, they looked dominant. The second round robin didn't quite go in their favor, did end up going 1-2, but first round robin was just good enough that they managed to get through it and did push onward. But with that said, that is going to complete the 1 seeds being placed into the upper bracket, and there it is. We get to see how this is going to play out. So Conduit will be facing a 2 seed from either groups B or D. Same for Imperial Gaming. Going Ghost and RAR will be playing against either groups A or C's 2 seeds. So we will be getting those matchups figured out very shortly. Tex, anything you want to touch on while we're looking at this bracket?
I don't have a lot of thoughts right now. Obviously, we're getting these first seeds out there. I'm curious to see particularly what Imperial Gaming and RAR get matched up against, because they're 2 of the teams that I'm really excited to see how their trajectory. Obviously, I'm excited for all these teams. They've all had really interesting narratives so far. But I'm Imperial Gaming is one of the ones I'm interested in seeing how their playoff run's going to look, and I think it's going to be critical who they take in that first round.
Definitely agree with you there. But with that said, Tex, let's take a look at some of these 2 seeds now. We've got, coming from Group A, Conduit Spark. Group B is going to be Infernal Dive. Group C, MDF. And Group D, Clinical. I think, Tex, unless you got something to say, we're just going to hop straight into the draw here. Yeah?
Let's dive into it. I mean, obviously, this group might... That was not on purpose. That was not on purpose. Like, most of the years, I just was winging it there. I do got to say, though, these second seeds, a lot of these, 3 of these have incredible logos. Just absolutely A-tier, first seed in my heart logos.
Yeah, MDF's logo is the best in the league. There's no bias there. Clearly.
None at all. None whatsoever.
I totally didn't make it in 20 minutes in MS Paint, but it is time to get this draw underway. Cycling on your screen, you do see now the 4 teams that are the second seeds. The first team to be selected and placed into the upper bracket is going to be Group D's Clinical. They will be playing up against Conduit Surge in their first round of playoffs.
So, Clinical, while their season didn't exactly live up to their name, Clinical is definitely excited they're coming out as the second seed from Group D. Pharma and Meekin have looked incredible in this team's win, and definitely look to be key parts of the roster. Their losses have looked a little tough, but this team is one that might surprise a lot of people with a win in the first round of playoffs. If they come out on top in Week 8, there's a legitimate chance this team can ride that momentum through to the final.
Yeah, I'm actually extremely excited. I think Clinical has been one of the teams that I personally have been a huge fan of, have been wanting to see do very well. Conduit Surge, gonna be a tall ask, I think. A lot of people are expecting Conduit to do fairly well, so we will have to see. But with Clinical placed, that does mean we're gonna take another stab at the second seeds, see who's gonna get placed in next. The second team to be selected and placed into the upper bracket from the 2 seed pool is going to be Conduit Spark from Group A. They will be playing up against Going Ghost in their first round of playoffs.
Well, it's a tough matchup. With a surprising turn of events, Conduit Spark managed to take a tough opening to their season. sorry, excuse me, guys, and clinch a second seed showing in the second to last week of the regular season. Between some cheeky flex picks, the roster additions of Insomniac to the jungle, and just some clever plays through the early games, this team is definitely looking to take an upset win in their first round and send a jolt through the upper bracket. A little emphasis on that one for you there, Brennan.
I much appreciate the fact that you just used the term jolt. Conduit Spark kind of turning things around after a rough early start to the season, so definitely excited to see how they're going to perform up against Going Ghost. We're going to take a quick look as well at the bracket as it's filling out. Meant to do this before the last one as well, but it's fine. It is worth noting, with these two teams placed in, the last two teams will be locked in as well, but we've got Infernal Dive, we've got MDF. Let's just draw them anyway. Let's have a little more fun with it. The third team to be selected from the 2-seed pool is, of course, going to be Infernal Dive. They will be playing up against Imperial Gaming for their first round of playoffs.
Ooh, okay. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be a fun. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Infernal Dive. Coming into the season, Infernal Dive was projected to be one that would end up in the lower bracket. After losing to RAR in Week 1, they silenced everybody, only losing a single game to RAR in Week 4 and barely losing a series to Hyperion Sword in Week 5. With how strong Attack Titan and the rest of ID have seemed, in addition to them being part of the three-way tie in Group B, this team is arguably one of the strongest second seeds and will definitely be wanting to challenge for the championship.
Yeah,
that's an exciting pickup.
That matchup is hype.
That is crazy.
Arguably the strongest teams in this tournament, and they're happening right in the first round. That's tough, but sometimes the draw does land that way, and I'm very excited to see what the result of that will be.
This is one of the best parts about being in a tournament, like a bracket tournament, right?
Yeah.
Oh, love it.
And, you know, there is double elimination, so there's even a chance that these two teams end up facing each other in finals. Like, that's the level of strength that I think these two teams have. So we'll have to see how it plays out, but that does just leave one team. MDF is going to be facing RAR in their first round of the upper bracket.
All right, talking about MDF real quick. So, coming off a 3-0 second round robin, MDF has a ton of momentum entering playoffs. All 5 members of this team have had significant carry performances, and a few spicy picks up their sleeves to take over games. As the group defined by fringe bot laners, keep your eyes on BAM and Chiller Frost to have the spiciest picks on the roster. But the Master of Cheese will live up to their name. To try and take an upset win and run at the title. Only question is exactly how they will attempt to do so.
Yeah, MDF, no stranger.
I also
to
encourage
cheese.
everyone to try to say that name. Like, I can't. Make sure you do fromage.
And that's
like,
exactly
Brennan gets so upset with me.
That's exactly why it was selected to be that name. But that does lock in the upper bracket. So on your screen now, you do see the results of the upper bracket and the first round of matchups. It will be Conduit Surge taking on Clinical, Imperial Gaming versus Infernal Dive, Going Ghost up against Conduit Spark, and RAR taking on MDF. Anything you want to look at in these matchups, where are your eyes peeled? I know we talked about Imperial and Infernal. I think that's going to be hype, but what?
Yeah.
Anything else?
All of them are exciting in their own way, but I think the next one that has my intrigue after Imperial and ID is probably Going Ghost and Conduit. That's just gonna be interesting because you have one team that's had very defined ups and downs, and then Going Ghost is just coming in swinging, right? And this could be a pretty big upset game, possibly depending on how the series goes. But those are probably the two big ones for me. But all of these are going to be bangers.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think the upper bracket is going to be so much fun to watch. There's going to be so many really, really close, really, really tense matchups. As a reminder, everything up until your respective brackets finals are going to be best of 3s. So the upper bracket finals will be best of 5. The lower bracket finals will be best of 5, and the grand finals will be best of 5. Everything else is a best of 3. It's going to be close. I expect a lot of these sets to go to 3 games, and it's going to be tough, to say the least, but that will lead us into the lower bracket. To reiterate, as a result of a few teams dropping out, a few of these matchups are going to fall into place fairly quickly. Due to this, 2 3 seeds will be receiving a bye. We mentioned it before, groups C and D. Additionally, these two teams cannot end up on the same side of the bracket. So if Group C is placed into the top half, Group D will have to be placed into the bottom half. With this in mind, the third-seeded teams coming out from each group are as follows. Abyssal Haven Frostbane, Hyperion Sword, Revolution Shangold, and G&E Aquamarine. The first team to be selected and placed into the lower bracket is going to be Hyperion Sword.
Hyperion Sword. Of the third-seeded teams, Hyperion Sword has looked the strongest in the second round robin. They managed to turn around a 1-2 start of the season with a stunning 3-0 score in the second half of the season. They lost out in tiebreakers, though, to both RAR and Infernal Dive. Boasting a 4-2 score, they are the heavy favorites in most matchups they'll experience in the lower bracket, with some big performances from CHJ and, might get this wrong, Zolas in Week 7, and the veteran leadership in Attila. What that veteran leadership can provide, this team will be a threatening force for the remainder of their playoff lives.
Yeah,
That's pretty exciting. They've had they're on the upswing, right? They're entering playoffs just on the upward swing.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very, very strong for Hyperion. They ended their season on a 3-0 scoreline in the second round robin. They've looked incredible as the season's progressed. So if there's a team in the lower bracket I'm expecting to do extremely well, it's gonna be Hyperion. We'll have to see, though. There's still a lot of League of Legends to be played. With that mention, the second team that will be drawn from the remaining 3 seeds is going to be Abyssal Haven Frostbane.
Abyssal Haven Frostbane. Is this the most syllables in a team name that we've got? As one of the teams to take a game off of Imperial Gaming, AH Frostbane has shown a handful of high points. Coming into the second to last week, a single win was needed to clinch themselves an upper bracket slot. But the wind seemed to have left their sails. I was trying to fit a pun in there. I couldn't commit myself to it. A 1 series in the lower bracket might just be what the team needs to right this ship and make a dark horse run through the playoff.
Worth noting as well, due to the fact that Revolution Shangold and G&E Aquamarine both get buys, Abyssal Haven will be placed onto the opposite side of the bracket from Hyperion Sword. Otherwise, both teams with a bye would end up in the same half of the lower bracket, and that's a no-no. We can't do that here. So, they will be placed into the third matchup in the lower bracket. With that said, we've got 2 more teams to draw from the third seeds. Those 2 teams are going to be between, of course, as I just mentioned, Revolution Shangold and Abyssal Haven Frostbane. Nope, G&E Aquamarine. I'm looking at it, and I'm even looking at it wrong. It's been a long night, guys.
G&E Aquamarine might beat AH Frostbane.
Yeah, they're basically the same, right? They're not. They're much different play styles, but the third team to be selected and placed into the lower bracket will be G&E Aquamarine.
Oh, I love it. Our friends from my alma mater, Iowa State. Big ups. Coming into the final week, G&E Aquamarine needed a win to lock themselves a spot into the upper bracket. And while they managed to take game 1, the series ultimately fell away from them. This team will be looking to bounce back and start their run through playoffs. As they've shown, they have what it takes to compete against the top teams in the league, being the only team to take games off of going ghost in Group D, which is significant. They've proven they can make gains. They've proven they can make giants bleed. So we'll have to wait and see if they're able to upset a power team into an early exit.
Yeah, very excited to see. I think G&E has been on the upswing. They're, like we mentioned, they're the only team that's taken down Going Ghost in any single game, right? Going Ghost still 6-0 on the season, but both single game losses were to G&E Aquamarine, so very excited to see if they're going to be able to continue riding that. It's going to be fun, to say the least. But that does leave one last team in our third seed pool, and that will be Texas' very own Revolution Shangold.
Hey, the boys. All right. So Shangold is one of the teams receiving a bye in the first round. So Shangold had a tough group to get out of. They had some close games against MDF and Conduit Surge, and looked dominating up against DePaul University. But roster instability has plagued this team throughout the regular season, and if the Revolution that showed up against DePaul comes out during playoffs, this team can definitely surprise others, surprise other teams from other groups in the second round. We got to see that stability.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Of course, we are going to take a quick look at the lower bracket as these teams have been placed in. Hyperion Sword going to be at the top of that one. GNE Aquamarine in the second matchup. AH Frostbane in the third. Revolution in the fourth. Anywhere your eyes are peeled here, Tex? Just looking at the three seeds.
Hyperion Sword is like that line, right, between lower and upper bracket, and it's going to be interesting who they get picked up, right? Because I think when we look at the fourth seeds, there are teams that can threaten, that can take away these opportunities that some of these borderline first seed or borderline second seed, borderline third seed teams like Hyperion Sword is not guaranteed to make it down the line, and I'm really interested to see who they get in the pickup. The rest of the teams have a lot more competition around them, so it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. But my eyes are very much fixed on Hyperion Sword to see who they get matched up first.
It is worth noting as well, while we have this graphic open, I do want to touch on, again, how the upper and lower brackets will function in conjunction. For example, if we look at the upper bracket here, Conduit, Surge, and Clinical play their first round against each other. The loser of that matchup will be facing off against the winner of Hyperion and whoever they select. The rest of the bracket will follow suit. So Imperial Gaming, Infernal Dive, GNE Aquamarine will have to face whoever loses that matchup. AH Frostbane will have to face the loser of Going Ghost and Conduit Spark, and Revolution Shangold, that matchup will have to face the loser of RAR and MDF. However that falls, we'll see how it plays out. But with that said, there's only one more pool of teams to get through. Our two fourth-seeded teams coming in from groups B and C are going to be New Wave Vice and DePaul University. All right, I mean, I guess we can just not wait any longer. We've been here long enough, right? But
Let's dive into it.
The first team to be selected and placed into their first round matchup is going to be New Wave Vice. They will be taking on AH Frostbane in their first round matchup.
Okay. All right. So, New Wave Vice, drawn into what appeared to be one of the toughest groups at the top of the season. New Wave Vice definitely fell short of where they wanted to be. They've had some solid showings, including taking a game off of Hyperion back in Week 1, but their mid to late game team fighting has left much to be desired. Their back's against the wall. We'll have to see how they hold up against AH Frostbane in their first round matchup.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see this team. I think their scoreline is a little deceiving. 0-6, I think they were 1-12 on the season. It doesn't look pretty, right? But they have had a lot of really, really solid early games, and I'm interested to see if this roster has finally kind of gelled together and if they're really going to be able to start, trying to gain some momentum on the rest of the league. If they're able to take a win, could make things pretty interesting, could make things really, really fun. But that does mean we will have just one last team to draw, and no surprises here. It's gonna be, who would have guessed, DePaul University.
Surprising all of us, with being the last team here. DePaul is a fan favorite, right? We all love DePaul. You guys have been incredible to watch and play and grow, across the season, for all of us here at ZDG. But ended up being in one of the deceptively harder groups to exit top 2 in. With only a single game win over Revolution Shangold in Week 5 and the 2-0 over New Wave Vice in Week 4, DePaul is looking to silence the critics when they take on Hyperion Sword this Thursday. A win would be massive for this team, and they've shown they have what it takes to take down Group B before. Only time will tell if they have the ability to do it again. And this has got to be, I might be jumping the gun, Brennan, but this is DePaul Hyperion Sword. I'm excited for this one. This is going to be cool.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. I think DePaul has looked really, really strong, but you mentioned it. Hyperion is kind of that line right between what we would consider the upper and lower bracket teams. They effectively were an upper bracket team, right? They ended 4-2, tied with Infernal Dive, tied with RAR, and just tiebreakers got them, right? It's unfortunate it happens, but very, very tough opponent to be matching up against here right at the top of the bracket. With that said, we're going to take a look at the updated bracket on your screens now. We see, additionally, GNE Aquamarine, Revolution Shangold do get those buys. We'll be moving into the second round of the lower bracket. Hyperion Sword and DePaul University will be playing to continue their playoff lives this Thursday. AH Frostbane and New Wave Vice as well. Tex, where are your eyes drawn?
This lower bracket, it's gotta be Hyperion Sword and DePaul. It's just, there's nothing. I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's the underdog, and it's like underdog versus underdog almost, right? Like, Hyperion Sword has turned around their season, and because of the tiebreakers, it's like they're in a situation where they're having to fight for their lives a little bit. And then DePaul is the pure underdog. They're a team that came in brand new. They're kind of trial by fire, learning how to play in competitive as a group of 5, and they're going against one of the better teams out there in the part of the bracket space that they're in. That whole matchup is incredible to me. I'm very excited for that. Also excited for New Wave Vice. If they take a game or take a series off of AH Frostbane, it's gonna be incredible. What a way to start the series or the playoffs if that's how it goes.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you for the most part. I think New Wave has looked good. I think AH Frostbane has started to waver off a little bit towards the end of the season. So if there's a matchup that New Wave can kind of, find that little spark, light the ignition, and keep their playoff, ride that wave, if you will, through the rest of playoffs.
I was gonna say, this isn't Conduit Spark. They're not.
Listen, when I was writing all of the team blurbs, I was trying to find a way to say something about riding a wave, and I couldn't find it. But, it's fun. It could be nice.
Hey, you're an excellent writer. You're doing great.
Oh, I don't know about that. But with that said, I want to take one last look here at the upper bracket, make sure we're all aware of how this is going to play out. I mentioned it before. The loser of Conduit Surge Clinical will be facing off against the winner of Hyperion DePaul. The loser of Imperial Infernal Dive will be facing off against GNE Aquamarine. The loser of Going Ghost Conduit Spark will be playing off against the winner of AH Frostbane New Wave Vice. And the loser of RAR MVF will be playing up against Revolution Shangold in 2 weeks' time. This Thursday, your matchups are on your screen now and will be on your screen once the draw show has fully concluded. With that said, Tex, anything else you want to touch on? Anything come to mind? Any last-minute thoughts here?
If you've got buys or you got time between like if you have a literal week of no matches, competitive matches, get like big scrims, do some best of 5 practices, like just make sure you're going above and beyond on that in that interim time. Even if you're a top seed and you end up in a situation where you've got time between games, and if you're one of the lower bracket teams that has those buys, play games together, play constructed games, because that is gonna set you up for so much more success than you have otherwise, because it's always dangerous when you get into playoff season and you start relaxing when you really got to put the pedal to the metal. Everyone across the board, right? We've seen teams in lots of tournaments that go from bottom seed, right, lose one game and you're out of everything, to finals, and it's all because of how much effort you put in the back half of the season. So it's gonna be a grind, but I'm excited. There's a lot of really cool matchups, a lot of cool storylines coming through here, especially in the lower bracket.
Yeah, very excited to see how it will all play out. We will, of course, be covering the upper bracket next week for playoffs. The following week will be lower bracket. We'll be alternating as the upper bracket has weeks off every now and then. So we will be catching you guys here on Thursday night for that upper bracket matchup. Yet to be determined. We will decide, I think, tonight, tomorrow night. We'll figure it out. But with that said, that's going to do it for us here. All 14 teams have been selected and placed into their brackets. Your matchups will once again be shown on the end screen here, but for myself, for Tex, for all of the ZGG staff, for everyone that works to make, all the new assets, all the everything that we're doing, here. We wish you a wonderful night. Best of luck in the remainder of your seasons, and hopefully we see you guys towards the end of the season. Take care. Have a good night.